How often do we define grief as this great outpouring of emotion? A broken sob, a strained cry, a hoarse choking noise, lodged in the back of our throat, cutting off all air and all sound from the lungs. Devastation is a word that I use to describe grief. It's devastating. They were devastated, to be destroyed utterly and wholly. And it has not been like that for me. I mean, not at all. Not in the slightest. On November 8th, I woke up around my usual time of like 5:30 a.m. Yeah, I had wanted to draw something the night before, but put it off till the next morning, thinking that I would have time before school. So when I got up, I did my cursory check of all social media, YouTube, Gmail, Tumblr, Twitter, etc. And I noticed there was a message in my direct messages from my best friend Leo, who just recently moved to Wisconsin and was going to school out there. She asked after me, "Are you all right? Did you hear? Did you see?" I was like, "See what?" I responded. It's chill in my gut. It was on NPR. There was a shooting in Thousand Oaks. I mean, writing this, I'm almost bitter. My best friend, halfway across the United States, knew before I did, because I, who went to bed early the night before, who had missed checking in on friends and family, and who had missed when the first shots were fired around 11 p.m. The sick feeling just curled in the back of my stomach. And then my mom came in and relayed similar and more pressing news. My best friend Noelle was at Borderline that night, and she hadn't answered her phone. So I sent her a DM on Instagram, not expecting a response, and then I went to school, and we were somber. I couldn't stop moving. I had to be doing something. I was checking the news constantly, waiting for the names of the 12 victims, and I wasn't sad. I mean, not yet. No, I was angry. I mean, I was so damn angry. I went outside and I hit an old set piece with a crowbar, and I guess I had gripped the metal wrong and it had twisted and burned my hands. Kept me cognizant. And so I kept working in my classes, and lunch was just a lull in activity. I was pacing the lobby of our theater, tense and quick, and I was checking Twitter constantly, and I could see people reaching out on friends and family because, I was one of them, and then I called an emergency number, anything, just anything to get names, but it was all shit that I already know before. Red Cross donations, teen center sheltering victims, donations, nothing with names, with confirmation. I had gained a more frantic pace in the theater, and I ate a little. It's like a sandwich and 2 apples. And then I looked at my phone and I saw that I had there was a message in my direct messages from somebody responding to an inquiry about the people at Borderline. I was just informed by my friend who goes to church with Noelle that she didn't make it. And I am so sorry for your loss. I mean, quite literally, I cast my phone aside and started bawling in the theater. The worst had been confirmed. And so I just stood there, bawling into my friend's arms. I always find it funny how in film, how tightly and how fervently a character could just grip somebody grieving, and I experienced it then. That fervent grip and that just panicked attempt to calm. So I gulped down some air and reached for my phone because I had to tell my mom. And so I called, and it turns out that she had found out just after I did, and she didn't want me to know on my own. And I came home from school early on November 8th. My brother had decided to stay at school. It was his choice. Then later at 6 p.m., my mom and I were to go to the vigil for the victims, and my dad was going to be working late, so I sent him a text. I said, "Dad, I need a hug. Please come home." And then the vigil was unreal. The logic of my head had always told me that it was never a matter of how, but when a mass shooting would occur, and God, I hate to be proven right. The light from the candles was just almost too much for me, because the light and the glow from the hills were less than artificial, and so we stood there, my mom, my friend, and me, just staring at this small cluster of candles. They knelt by the impromptu memorial, but I couldn't cry. It was like all my emotions had just stopped at last. Then the winds picked up and my mom got nervous, so we came home and we began to pack. I grabbed my collection of Tolkien books and my brother grabbed his coin collection, and we were exhausted, just tired to the bone, so we went to sleep. Then at like midnight we were shook awake because of the evacuation. It was so frantic. Our cat almost got out in the confusion, and the dog too, and so we took two cars. I could just see orange from over the hill. And so I called my dad and I kept the line open just in case. And we just drove. We drove and drove and drove. And at 1 a.m. we reached Camarillo and we had sheltered with a friend. And then at 2 a.m. I finally cried. From exhaustion, from exertion, from grief. I was drowning in it. It was like somebody just taking a bucket, full to the brim of my emotion and just dumped it at my feet. I was drowning in it. And I cried and cried and cried, and yet I wasn't devastated. Because devastated was a word reserved for Paradise, California. Burned to the ground. Devastated was for Tony and Wendy, parents who didn't have a child. and devastated was for the city of Thousand Oaks. I refuse to be devastated. So I got up next morning and I worked. And I worked and I worked and I worked. And I have not stopped. You know, it's been 4 days since my friend was unjustly murdered, and I have not stopped. I refuse to stop. And I know I wholly myself am in this, and I am pacing towards the inevitable, but, you know, my grief is just what it is. It's action. And that's how I choose to define it. Action.